Sae'Von Springer is the owner and founder of Native Assets. Any views expressed by Sae'Von or his guest are their own thoughts and opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. Any guest appearance by representatives of Web3, NFT, crypto, or any other kind of organization does not constitute an endorsement by Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be mistaken as financial advice. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult a qualified professional when considering any investments of any kind. So today's guest has been deep in tech for years, from helping lead as a technology business analyst at JPMorgan Chase to advising emerging AR and VR companies back in 2018 before the term metaverse was a part of the collective conscious. She's what the epitome of an OG is. With a wealth of experience building tech products for some of the world's biggest companies, odds are you've used something that she has built. And to be frank, I could wax on about her track record, but I'll just read off a few of her stats. Senior Engineering PM for Apple's Applied Machine Learning team. Senior Engineering PM for Apple's Apple Pay Engineering team. Technical Product Director Lead for Nike's Innovation Office. Yes, she worked on Crypto Kicks. Blockchain Advisory Board member at Portland State University, founder scientist at Matter Science DAO, and now she's leading client product management at Palm NFT Studio. Bianca, blessings, great day. Thank you for being here. How are you?
What's up, man? I think I should hire you as my hype man. Best bio I heard from anyone.
Love it. You know, it's important to set the stage and the expectations for people so that they really understand who they're listening to. Because to be frank, it's not that hard to get on a microphone and speak. And as prevalent as Twitter spaces are and all of that, there are a lot of people who, just because they hear someone speaking, they may give undue credit and credence to what they're saying when maybe they don't have the track record or the history to really back that up. So, you know, it just got to do you justice.
Yeah. No, it's a narrative. Everything is connected, and totally believe that the path leads you to the present. So, no, love that.
For sure. So, if you could just kind of, because I thought this would be a really powerful conversation to get people more in the mindset of what it really takes to build a product across tech as a whole, but also in this particular ecosystem, but also too, maybe touch a little bit on, you know, what an innovation lab even is and the process that you've seen firsthand and how these massive billion-dollar companies start to implement new technologies into what they're already doing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on what stage the company is in. So, you know, for example, my experience with Apple, I created Apple Pay's first beta testing program to test all of the Apple Pay product lines of businesses. So everything from like transit cards to Apple Cash, Apple Card. And as part of that, part of the main goal for the beta program was to get feedback from internal users as well as external vendor users to inform new product development. So I think in a larger stage company, a lot of the new ideas come from feedback. And then those ideas, you know, they get validated by how much feedback there is. And it's kind of like consumer first. And I think that leads the path for then prioritizing like which ideas will then be formed into new tech. But from more of a lab perspective, which is my experience in Nike, we focused a lot on prototyping. And so not necessarily having an idea that was going to go to market, but the goal was to prototype as many ideas and do discovery sessions to get to, you know, let's say multiple prototypes that could then be passed on to a team within Nike that could then lead to go to market. So for example, I worked on like Crypto Kicks, a patent, and we worked on a beta. We kind of go through not only like discovery, ideation, and we followed a lot of Amazon's one-pager process for new ideas, but figuring out what is the MVP, you know, what are the ideal outcomes of this prototype if it does go to market, who would manage it, you know, what is kind of like the vision outside of just MVP, and then actually building it out for folks to test and to demo to other teams. So yeah, it just really depends on the stage you're at. And then I think in Web3, like this is just such a new space, and as much as there's traditional product development, I think that Web3 is also a traditional in terms of like what the product development process is like, because it's decentralized, because it's about ownership and has different values that I think does change how you think about making new technology. It's not so much, for example, housed in a corporation, one corporation. It's about collaboration. It's about like a lot of like emphasis on how the community feels, and also a lot of dependency on the community. And so I think it's a different way of thinking about product management. It's a different value mindset of like what is considered a good idea. And then in terms of building it out, it is built out different because you're trying to build out in a decentralized way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So that makes me think. What have you seen, or in what ways? Because when I think of somebody like a Nike and an Apple, both of these are huge behemoths, right? And
Hmm.
for one, there's a difference in this approach of, okay, we want to spin up an innovation lab, and we may not have any intention to actually productize this. Versus, hey, we know we want to take this feature and put it in. And I don't know, historically studying Apple, they tend to be on like that last curve of adoption with technology. They want to see everybody else run out as the pawns and say like, okay, why didn't it work for them? Why didn't it work for them? Why didn't it work for them? Why did it
Yes,
work over
that's
there?
exactly their
Then when
strategy.
Apple, integrates it, usually that's like the checklist of, all right, cool, this is a go on this piece of technology. Everybody's going to do it now. So first question is just where do you think that energy differs? Because in theory, Apple could also spin up an innovation lab, right? So maybe that's a risk
Mhm.
aversion thing. And the other side, the other question being, having worked at that sort of scale at these companies, but also being part of a DAO, where have you seen sort of processes that you think should be adapted more from these corporate models into DAOs, and maybe vice versa? 'Cause it seems like working in an
Mm.
innovation lab has a little bit of that DAO spirit within that company, but obviously there's some differences. So feel free to navigate that question
Yeah.
how you like.
So I think in terms of like like and remind me, the first question was around like how does this energy kind of develop differently across the different companies?
Yeah.
Um I think like for it honestly just depends on company culture
Mhm.
and who is, which I think extends down from leadership. So at Apple, I feel like Steve Jobs was of the attitude of always taking a look at what's out there and doing it much better. And so I think that has become a common pattern through everything he's done. I mean, the phone, a computer. Um, and I think that's just kind of carried forward throughout the rest of the culture. And so, because we have such a reputation around building great products, whether it's hardware, software, and just kind of having this cleanliness to it, we kind of have to hold to that standard because the folks that are like big fans of Apple have that expectation, and that's where a lot of our consumer base is from. So to kind of keep up with that, I think like withholding those expectations, now Apple's kind of in this pattern of needing to constantly make sure that they're building out products that are up to um, standard based on what else is out there. So I think that's like from Apple perspective. From Nike perspective, I think like they're in a different mindset of being in a number one brand in like the retail space. Um but I think introducing the innovation lab, which just started when I had joined them, was to bring focus to Nike evolving into a more technical company and kind of showing their technical strength through this innovation lab. Like for example, the innovation lab was led by one of the co-founders of Amazon Alexa, who created that. And so the premise was to really, you know, um, take all these potential ideas within Nike and then have a small team that could build out prototypes that were very strong and validated. That would make it easier for Nike at scale to then build out across other teams, because we didn't have that, like technology isn't like isn't the one thing that like you think of when it comes to Nike. You think of their
Mhm.
brand and you think of their community and the marketing. And so I think the innovation lab was a way to enter into that and put a foot into that space, and to help build that technical talent around the prototypes and expand upon that. And then now you have crypto kicks, which I think has like really shown what Nike can do in terms of tech. And I think that they're, one of the leaders in the Web3 space because of their acquisition of Artifact and the creativity that goes into it. So I think like, that all kind of started with a prototype. So,
So then follow up on that. What was it? Do you think it just happened to be the timing that they were interested in pushing forward on the tech side of things? Maybe they were sitting back at Nike like, hey, we're a clothing brand, but tech companies are eating the world. And if we really want to push past this plateau, we have to, just like Apple wants to step into vehicles
yeah.
potentially or wearables, Nike's like, boom, we got to step. So do you think it was that general energy that they already had that made them feel comfortable pulling the trigger? Because Artifact, correct me if I'm wrong, was not around that long before Nike swooped in and said, yo, we're going to buy you. And so they had to, and being as big of a company they are, I imagine they had to have some board meetings, some conversations, this, that, and the third.
Yeah.
So why do you think they were confident making that big of a bet that quickly?
Yeah, I think because, one, the energy was building. I think like during the time that I joined, a major theme, and that's still happening with within Nike, is tech transformation. I think that's like number one priority, and just evolving all of their systems to be with the up to date current technology and getting ahead of. Nike's always kind of been ahead of the game in sports technology and retail and just the way that they think. And now it was time to do that, in the tech industry. In terms of like why I think they bought Artifact, I think again, like it kind of had to do with, Nike was still attracting a lot of folks from large tech companies, but I think that, there's a certain conversion threshold and I think like standpoint of like convincing someone, about joining the tech organization. And I think the lab, because it was so small, and we only had like a certain amount of people on the team, it's hard to see how innovative Nike really is behind the scenes, unless you're, particularly in touch with that team or whatnot. And I think buying Artifact was one to show the world that like, okay, we really are invested in tech. We're serious about this because we're now going to be one of the first in the Web3 space. And two, I think they were just acknowledging the fact that, we didn't have the resources to really focus on building out, just Web3 at that point in time, at the speed that they knew the Web3 industry was growing. So having seen like how creative Artifact was and the resources they had, I think it made total sense that like, okay, the branding matches, the amount of creativity, marketing, and now they just need that tech talent. So I think it totally makes sense. Like, and I think it's a powerful message to everyone else, and has been since they acquired them. Yeah,
Definitely. I mean, it's definitely a different move in nature, but the impact I would say is up there similarly to when Facebook changed their name to Meta. It kind of made people really sit and be like, damn, okay, I guess this is going to be around for a while, huh? Nike not just going to throw that type of bread around just, in a lackadaisical fashion. So thank you for that setup and that segue. Since you were at Nike, I imagine, and I don't know if you were there still at the same time, but around the time of this happening, what was it that made you say, hey, now that Nike is getting into NFTs more directly through this acquisition, I'm going to leave the innovation lab and go work for an NFT company? That I'm fascinated to know kind of how that played out.
No, I get asked this a lot because I think you would assume that I think being in the like right before the peak, because I had left right before they actually acquired Artifact. So I wasn't there at the time of when they acquired Artifact. It made a lot of sense when I saw it happen, but I left before the peak. And I think like I kind of realized that, and this is with any corporation, I think not just Nike, but there are a lot of like different decision makers, different hurdles to really get a product from idea to go to market. And so, even though we created some prototypes for crypto kicks and different, and had many discussions with Nike leadership on like, what does this mean for our consumer audience, and how do we create decentralized access to this product? I think that it wasn't clear like how many decisions and processes we need to go through to really get it to market. And so because of that, I learned like, if you want to make something fast, go to startup world. Um, and then also that, given how much focus was on NFTs at Nike, and just knowing that like, crypto and Bitcoin was starting to be talked about a lot more, but not NFTs yet. I kind of had predicted like, okay, NFTs is going to be the next thing that just follows up with crypto naturally because of this Web3 values. Um, and that's when I realized that, I had the experience to now like be comfortable enough to jump into a more deeper NFT startup. And sort of just had validation internally that this was technology that corporations are looking at and they see it as important part of like the consumer process. So I think that's what really like made me jump out right away, is just like knowing that there were so many ideas to take on, but needing the speed and the fast resources to build things out, I think was really what led me to startup life.
Mm, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, was it something about Palm in particular that attracted you to this particular NFT company? Because there's a lot of NFT companies out here, and
Yeah. Well,
Palm
actually, I
hadn't.
started out at a company called Record Shop.
Mhm. Did you
And
co-found that?
no, but I was head of
Okay.
drops. I was head of NFT drops there. And still amazing experience to this day when I look back on it. But essentially, like at the time that I had left Nike, um, Flow and Top Shot was super popular.
Mhm.
And I think it was just like the main, headliners. And so I thought like, okay, like this is the time to get into Flow or Dapper Labs or something on the Flow blockchain. So there was a music NFT startup, had connected with some people and found out that they were building a music marketplace, NFT marketplace on the Flow blockchain, that it was backed by Dapper Labs, backed by Roham, CEO of Top Shot, and essentially just had all of them as advisors. I thought that was a great like chance to get in. It was a great time. It had the right people. Um, and the CEO was not only a DJ himself, but had also written like the Bible for Ruby on Rails.
Mm.
So kind of had a good mix of actual music experience as well as technology. And I kind of took that as a like a sign of all the factors of success. Obviously, when you get into an early stage startup, you never know what's going to happen, and we face different challenges of just really figuring out what does a marketplace even mean outside of OpenSea. What does it mean for music? How do you make music NFTs? What is considered a music NFT? There were just so many questions, early questions, that I think that we were experimenting on, and we were like super early on with like Royal and Audius, that if everything was just experimentation at that point. So there was really no way to know what was going to be the thing that worked, which was why it was so fun. But I think that's what also was such a challenge, was figuring out like what is the value proposition of um, music NFTs, and does the Top Shot model apply to
Mm.
music, and how does that translate over? Um, and so yeah, I was head of drops, where I focused a lot on mostly drop operations, so like the economics of like supply and pricing and ensuring that we don't dilute the marketplace. But eventually kind of took on more responsibility around like how do the music artists that we gain as clients actually build an NFT based on the assets that they give to us? How do we make that process easy? And then once we mint those NFTs, what's the economics behind it, and what's the marketing behind it? And how do we turn this into this long term, solution? And the website is still there, but it's kind of got, I would say, has a much smaller team now just due to funding. Um, but yeah, I think that's what really kicked off this like just innovation for NFTs. And so once I saw the value of building out a music NFT marketplace with just one industry, I was thinking, okay, like what about the possibilities of marketplaces for all kinds of industries? And I wanted to learn about how can I apply a marketplace to the movie industry or to gaming. And so I think that's what attracted me to Palm NFT Studio, was that not only did they have their Series B led by Microsoft, but they had all these clients that would kind of diversify the industries that I could understand from a marketplace perspective. So for me, like obviously, like as you can see, like one of the um, most fascinating NFT products that I'm passionate about is marketplaces and mechanisms around marketplace. But I think that learning about how it applies to every industry and learning about like the patterns that are in common with all, and how you can just play with, this core product is really fascinating to me. So yeah, that's why I joined Palm.
Hell yeah. So to that point, what have you learned in your time thus far? Because you were with Palm during the some of the more recent launches. You have this experience with Record Ship. You have experience, working on these innovation labs and working on very technical products that are ultimately consumer products, designed to be consumer products. We're at this period where a lot of NFTs and Web3, they're moving away from just being crypto native applications
Mhm.
and services and platforms to trying to appeal to a more mass audience that may not know what a MetaMask is or may not even know
Yeah.
what a chain is, a blockchain network in and of itself. So, what have been some of the lessons that you've learned, and what sort of, I guess, design or product principles you've tried to apply for anybody listening that might be trying to wrap their head around, what it actually looks like to do this well or at a high level?
Yeah. I'll start with things that I've learned and then kind of answer like your product question because I can also tie that back to an early question you asked about just the principles that are across industries. But things that I've learned, I think is just working with a lot of Web2 brands. I think there's an assumption that the popularity of the products in the Web2 space will translate into the Web3 space. Um, but so someone who, maybe sells out of, I don't know, let's just say water bottles in Web2, translating that to Web3, that same popularity, even if the brand name is the same, may not translate over. And I think that's one because of just education of the space. It's so new. I think three is just that um, that the Web 2 consumers may not necessarily be Web 3 consumers, and vice versa. I think that there's still a distinction there, and we can't assume yet that a consumer of the brand will, automatically buy a different type of product when they're kind of used to one product line. Um, and then I think just like a lot of, common pitfalls of just talking to brands about, what they expect out of the Web3 space from what they've seen out in the industry versus like what Web3 really is about. And so,
Mhm.
for example, you know, I noticed that there's a lot of brands out there, none that we work with particularly, but out there who, are focused on it more for um, just like all of the potential profit that they see. And then versus the values of Web3, which is actually more towards less about that and more about ideation and collaboration and creativity, decentralization, and not necessarily like streaming. I would say like revenue all into one space. It's really about like decentralized access and equity for all because everything is like the same price and there should be equal access to it, no matter who you are. So I think it's a very different value mindset and approach. And I think those are the things that you can take away from like just product, in Web 2 versus Web 3. Like in Web 3, I think that there's a lot of values that are actually like leading principles for product development of the future. Not just decentralized infrastructure, but giving ownership to individuals more. For example, health data, that I think data is a hot topic that can be passed around to all sorts of companies just from like signing terms and conditions. But to me, NFTs is a way to actually give true ownership and control back to an individual, and enable them to have more decision making over their identity or their ownership of things. um and then I think another thing about Web 3 is this the power of community. Like I think that there is this I think that in Web 2 it has been more in the power of corporation. And I think that's like partially why Web 3 developed. And I think that if you're going to go into Web 3 space and really make successful quote unquote products, it's actually much, much more focused on like what does the community value? Like how does this benefit them long term? And really like understanding them as opposed to, maybe like a couple leaders up top in the corporation. So I think that's like a very different way of thinking as well within Web3. In terms of like what Web2 values could transfer over, I think that there's still this, framework and foundation and structure within Web2 that I think is still really needed to build out in Web3. Um, like I feel like Web3 kind of comes off in this has a very like flexibility theme with its products and just like what is thrown out there. But I think it like, a part of Web2 that I think is really important that I still like to apply to Web3 product development is just kind of some of the standards of like first principles thinking and like foundations of technical structure. Because I still think that you need principles that are founded upon to kick off development, and then in terms of like what that how that development is portrayed, in a Web3 sense, might be different. So, yeah.
Mhm. So, what inspired you to, well, we'll get to that question in a second. For people who might be interested in product development, product management, how did you arrive at this? Because also you did some work with like a neuroscience advisory in the past. You have a very thorough background. So if you could walk us through how you even found your way into the sort of path that you're on right now, and then any advice for somebody who might want to get into it.
Yeah, I will say I have a very, very untraditional career path, and
Which is lovely to
it
see.
has been very experimental, which I think has also been how I got into product. But I can tell you that I never planned to be in the tech space. I actually started out as a biomedical engineer and wanted to be in biomechanics. So that's how I kind of started neuroscience. Um, and then, ironically, I realized after all of the biolab classes that if I invented something, it wouldn't actually probably exist until I passed away. So I was like,
Mm,
okay, I need to move into an engineering space where you build things and you see it in front of you. So that's kind of what led me to kind of go into something similar to computer science. I actually was in a guinea pig major at UPenn. It was essentially these two computer science professors that wanted to teach CS in a completely different way. And there was only 10 of us, and I was in the first class, and a lot of risk about what it meant because it wasn't a traditional degree. But the ideas was that if we kind of understood human psychology, anthropology, and economic incentives between humans, then we could build better CS products. So we actually would concentrate in one of those avenues. I concentrated in game theory, and then would build out, and then we would learn um, traditional computer science, and then have actual projects, hands-on projects where we built like a mini Facebook, a mini Google search engine. So that was really what kicked off, I think, just in general innovation for me. I mean, the theme of our degree was always to essentially like graduate with the skill sets, not necessarily just to like get any job, but to think of questions that people have never asked before,
to
which I think is
subvert
a really powerful.
expectations.
Yeah, it's a powerful statement because I think that like what the questions that you currently ask are problems that people know need to be solved, but that means that people are working on solving them. But if you ask questions that you didn't even realize existed, those are the problems that like are yet to be solved and can lead to innovation. So that was part of like me getting into just product development. I think another, and this is a fun fact, so I guess only the folks on this call are going to know, but my dad, he was the creator of Bluetooth software. So he was an innovator himself.
Oh
Yeah.
shit.
It's let's just say they're, small footsteps to following. But so when you have that hanging over your head, innovation is big in our family. And so, ever since I was younger, he just has all these ideas. And one of them was that one day I'm going to make technology wireless. And like, who knew? So that was also a big inspiration for me, just experimenting with my degree and with my career. And I knew I wanted to be an innovator like my father. Obviously, no predictions on the extent that he's impacted the world, but one day. Um, but after that degree, I think my whole mindset had changed. I realized from there that I wanted to do things differently. I think from the start. So what I mean by that was I purposely went into different industries and different roles to get different skill sets,
Mm.
whether or not someone would hire based on that. Because usually you see someone who just has
Mhm.
had depth. But for me, it was, can I get experience in banking? Can I get experience in big tech? Can I get experience in like one of the top retail brands? And I've learned about different industries through that. And then from those different companies, been in a different role each time. So, at JP Morgan, it was more data analysis. At Apple, I was more in program management. And then at Nike was the first time I actually got into product. And, to be honest, like I found it really hard to try to get into product without a like necessary traditional product background. It was really my belief and my ideas and my passion that's what led me to product. And I'm not gonna lie, I think like something that's a mission of mine is to like lower the barriers to entry to become a product manager because I think that you know product is a concept and it's not necessarily a degree in school. It's a way of thinking and it's based on maybe just knowing one thing really well. And it can be hard for especially entry level to get a product job unless you find the right path. And so for me, it took a long time to get there. And Nike was the first time that really saw my vision for things. And when I interviewed with the VP of innovation and explained like all of my ideas and just my approach to my career, I think that showed him I had this product mindset and this potential to be in product. And so that's really what kicked off my product career. Not traditional, but it was really what just got me started into it. And then from then on, it was, just sparking more ideas and you learn from others. And, from since then, I've just always been a product person. And I think there's different types of product people. There's more of the traditional product management of kind of like owning requirements and ensuring that it gets executed. Then there's, more of just visionary dreamers. That's more of me. So I think that there's different types and they're all useful skill sets and they all work together in really great ways. But I think like, we have to give more opportunity in my mind to enable people in product. And not have that be necessarily boundaried by a certain traditional outlook, if that makes sense. I mean, at this point in Web3, anyone can build
Mhm.
something amazing and do that. So yeah.
Is that part of the vision with the Matter Science DAO?
Yeah, so the Matter Science DAO is a DAO of different folks that are, I would say, like leaders in the metaverse and in the Web3 industry. And we've got some amazing folks. Some of the folks I worked on crypto kicks with. Some of the folks are really deep in like the music industry. We have someone basically from every different skill set and industry. And our goal is to build an incubator that will create more applications and products for the metaverse and to essentially fund those ideas. So exactly like you said, I think like it's for us, it's more about giving folks the opportunity to do that through a set of folks who can not only like offer advice and mentorship, but can also provide the funding needed to kickstart off that idea. And just try to essentially build out as much of this to support the metaverse to help more and more people get into Web3.
Mm. Now, obviously, from what I've looked at, and I just looked at some of this actually a few weeks ago when I was on your LinkedIn, and I was like, damn, I'm gonna have to apply for this. How do you see that process? Would you all ultimately want to keep it separate from the traditional kind of exit path that a lot of startup companies take? Or do you see the role serving as one where it's like, hey, let's bootstrap this as much as we possibly can, get this to a really awesome point. We see some good product market fit, and ideally some profitability there or some substantial growth. And then let's leverage all of that and then go raise against it where we can keep better terms for ourselves because we've done so much of it thus far. And we're not going where a lot of people usually go pre-product, and pitch an
Yeah.
idea, and then that kind of shifts the tables.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say it's yeah, less of the traditional type. Like I think our belief is that funding would be through the people,
Mhm.
and through those who get an NFT. So we actually like expect to help hold multiple rounds of NFTs at different stages, and the funding behind those NFTs would be a vote from the people, to support which ideas that we'll fund and which ideas will, um, be built out. And then from that, I think like, we're trying to see like, is there a different way to approach startup life? Like, does it have to be funding raised from investors, or could it be funding raised by the people? So it's kind of something we're actually experimenting with. But I think we're starting out with the people to see what that, how much like just investment belief wise we get. And then depending on that, like, and how strong the community is, I think at that point we'll kind of, debate on whether to actually go out and raise funding. But I think there's power in seeing, can a startup actually be raised through just funding of, the people. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm optimistic on that model. I've seen some other DAOs take a similar approach and have built out some products. Now, the scale of those products varies, but
Yeah,
as in terms of a model, that has definitely proven fruitful as far as products actually being launched and created. So,
totally.
especially, with people like you on the team, I'm very optimistic that y'all will see some dope outcomes from that. So we're getting close to time. So last kind of couple questions I want to ask you, based on where you sit right now in this kind of climate of the NFT and the crypto market and really the whole economy and markets as a whole, what is particularly drawing your attention, or what do you find most interesting to kind of follow these days? And that can be NFT related, it can be crypto, it can be tech related. Answer the question
Yeah.
however you like.
Um, I think that's something that there's two things about NFTs that I feel like haven't been unlocked yet and that I'm really fascinated by. I think what folks see on the surface of the hype around NFTs has been a lot of focus on imagery and brand and, um, communities like Bored Apes. But actually, what I think is the most valuable thing about NFTs is really the technology underneath it that can help automate a lot of, typical day-to-day processes, things like operations and supply chain and optimizing, all these different flows, where there can be manual, mistakes that add up. Having worked in So when I was at Apple, I worked on the machine learning team, and I specifically managed like the operations logistics portfolio, and the supply chain. And just from supporting like all the different applications of machine learning that can help to optimize supply chain, to me, that's the same thing of what NFTs can do. Like sometimes I think the most powerful products are not always known because it's just something you use every day. So you don't think about it too much. But I think like once people understand the power of NFT technology, I think that it will start to become an enabler of just corporate operations, and help to optimize so many things that like we honestly struggle with manually today. So I think that's one thing, and that can apply to many industries, everything from real estate to just essentially anything with operations. I almost think of them as like a next Oracle in a way. But another, I think, is figuring out how to create legally binding agreements within NFTs. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around, NFT IP and what you own and what you don't own.
Hmm.
And I think that it's, you know, anyone who buys an NFT, it's considered like code. Like the code is the law. But if you really break down the code, like the language within the code isn't technically legally binding or has legal, like terms and conditions, for example. So what I'm really interested in is I've been like advising and talking to different companies that um, essentially are building like a contract wrapper around the smart contract to legally bind um, the contract, such that when that NFT is sold to someone, you're very like there's big transparency on what you actually have access to or own, or essentially also allowing Web2 companies to create a legal agreement within the Web3 space. So I think that's also a very fascinating thing, just given that like IP is such a hot topic. So yeah, those are the things that I'm really interested in, especially for future state.
Well, thank you. I feel like that was very insightful and some alpha, depending on who was listening, in terms of just opportunities of things that, to your point earlier, if people aren't asking the question, then there probably aren't that many people working on the solution. So, yeah, I agree. I think we
Yeah,
have a
no,
lot of
thanks for
technology.
having me and really appreciate it. If you guys have any more questions, don't hesitate to holler.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you. Before you get out of here, let the people know where they can find you, follow you, get at you if they want to be advised or counseled, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. All of my socials have the same username. It's at the infamous, uh, spelled with PH instead of F in infamous, because my name is Bianca Pham and I'm super into puns. And my motto is if you be infamous for being yourself, you will get to where you need to be. So that's honestly how I've gotten to this place. And yeah, I truly believe that true success comes from being infamous for being yourself. So yeah, follow me.
Hell yeah.
Love to
Big
meet you
bars.
guys.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Bianca. This was awesome. And look forward
Thanks,
to the next one.
everyone. Awesome.